Welcome to Nantucket Community Television's coverage of the 2020 annual town election, which will be held on Tuesday, June 16th. I'm Charlie Walters, working remotely due to the coronavirus pandemic. And for the next half hour, I'll be interviewing Clifford Williams, one of three candidates seeking to fill two three-year terms on Nantucket Select Board.
Thank you.
There are a lot of things I want to cover in the next 30 minutes, but let me start with a situation that is likely to be here long after the pandemic, and that's rising seas and climate change, which are affecting Nantucket more than a lot of other places. What are your thoughts on those subjects?
You know, I run for selectman. Global warming is obviously a huge issue that's, I say, is beyond my pay grade. I think all we can do, and from what I've seen, we have flood maps. When we rebuild houses downtown, we put them higher in the air. Utilities, obviously you wouldn't put them in low-lying areas. I just mentioned I have an article for gasification at the dump to get rid of the trash and reduce the emissions through gasification and the methane gas that's produced by the landfill. So I'd like to see maybe the people a lot smarter than me could come down with those answers, and we just follow the guidelines for whatever they come up with.
Well, let me ask it another way then. We now have a coastal resiliency manager as of last year, and the town recently put out bids for a coastal resiliency plan, and presumably those proposed plans could come from anywhere in the United States. But the select board obviously can't know all the specifics about these things, but should they be the ones in charge of this? Or should it be the state? Or how do you see this playing out?
Well, it's just like the coronavirus. I mean, although I guess we have our own health department and we're our own town and county, we can make certain decisions. We seem to be basing our actions on the governor and the governor's council on health. And like I said, that's a pay grade much higher than what I'm in charge of. I wouldn't know that science or what we should best do. Like you said, if they can identify what's the best practices, then obviously it would be the job of the selectmen to implement those practices. But as far as that science, whether the globe's whether the tide's rising higher or slower, or we're getting warmer or colder, I think that's out of our hands. I think we should just go with the experts that could tell us and give us the guidelines. Like you said, if someone's going to come and give us a plan, I'd be more than happy to follow it.
In a roundabout way, that brings me to the form of town government, which we all know what that is and what it's been. Are you satisfied with the way that the town is using annual town meeting and sometimes special town meeting, 5 selectmen or select people, a select board? Does that form of government still fit Nantucket, do you think?
Well, with the select board, instead of a city council or a mayor, also comes town meeting. So other than just, if we went to another form of government, we probably wouldn't have as much legislative power, even though maybe people don't educate themselves as much as they should, and they should be better informed when they get to town meeting, because it turns into a meeting. I think you've seen that. But as much as it's kind of imperfect, it still gives us a certain amount of control. It gives us a lot of control. So otherwise we'd be relying on, just like we do in Washington with our senators and our congressmen, to do what we want them to do. And as we can see, that doesn't work too well. So I don't think we should ever get rid of town meeting.
What about the select board?
The select board, I think, goes hand in hand, unless I'm wrong with that same philosophy. If you get rid of the select board, you'd get rid of town meeting, and all you'd do is vote at the ballot for money issues, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but no, I think the select board is still the way to go. I think we should keep it. It's at least a balance of power. Maybe it's not as working as well as it should be. That's why I run, because I don't believe we're following the charter. And if we did follow the charter and we followed the procedures, I think things would run a lot smoother.
The most recent select board meeting, if I read the newspaper correctly, the packet that the 5 members had to look at was over 300 pages. So it's like reading a book a week to prepare for the select board meeting. Um, could you improve on that? Is there
Yeah,
a way to delegate?
right, and I think a lot of that stuff is maybe I want to say boilerplate language. Like when I didn't look at the whole packet this week or whatever meeting you were talking to, referring to, but um, there's a lot of items this time of year where we're basically um, people are coming to get liquor licenses or they're just permitting, and there's a lot of documents there that I wouldn't think you'd have to read that in depth to. Like I said, they're reoccurring every year, and I think once you get up to speed, I've been on the finance committee or was on the finance committee for 9 years, um, and once you learn how the budget works and you learn how things are done, it just becomes a lot easier to understand. And I don't think you have to spend as much time maybe educating yourself and reading that much into a lot of these documents. Like I said, I think a lot of them are boilerplate year after year at certain times.
As I reminded the viewers at the top of the show, you're one of 3 candidates running for 2 positions on the board. And if you look at the ballot, there are no other contested seats anywhere in town government this year. What can the town do to get more people interested in running for office?
It's just a personal a decision, and I think a lot of people, and I bring up the point about following the charter. I think a lot of people have become frustrated with the town, and I think you could see it from last night's selectmen meeting. At the beginning, a few people had comments to make about how they could better um, communicate with people and I guess address issues. And I think that's why people get frustrated with government or trying to work with government. They work all day. I have jobs, I have businesses, and then I donate what little time I have then to these volunteer positions like the FinCom, which, it costs you money. You're there. I know people are in a profession where they had to leave their business to come and go to these meetings. So they use it, it's kind of your duty, but a lot of people get exhausted after working all day, and then they feel frustrated and they move on. So I think, again, it gets back to if we could straighten out the form of government we have right now with the charter and have things run a little smoother, maybe people wouldn't be getting as frustrated and more people would show up and volunteer.
If there's been one constant on Nantucket over the last, well, at least over the last 50 years, it's been growth. More people, more cars, more construction, longer seasons, so on and so forth.
Right.
If somebody asks you what's your opinion on when are we going to get to a limit of growth? This may be something that comes, those limits may come after you and I are long gone, but it's something that I think we need to think about. So I'm curious what you think about the limits of growth on Nantucket, whether it's people, buildings, whatever it happens to be.
Well, it's a good thing that we've put, 50–60% of our property into conservation. So you're right, this little sandbar can't take much more. I mean, we pump around 4 million gallons of water, I believe, in the summertime. Our sewer system is only so big. I've seen other towns off island where they had no sewer capacity, so that when people came in to expand, they couldn't because there was no capacity. But you'll find when we need more capacity, a lot of people show up because they're relying on real estate, and we just increase our capacity. So maybe the technology will just one day catch up with us, and there won't be enough any more capacity, so you can't expand anymore. But then we get back to the fact there's only so many lots. I think this town is going to turn into where, and it's already kind of done that, where they buy a small cottage on the beach or even a big house on the beach, and they'll just tear it down and rebuild it and make it a McMansion. And it's just a sign of the times. People with a lot of money want to come here, and I think they're going to continue to do so. It's a great place. It's America. It's private property. If you want to build, you should be able to build. Zoning, we've continued to allow subdividing. We do that at town meeting, so town meeting allows it. So I guess we've we're in charge of our own destiny. So I've seen where we tried to stop subdividing for a few years. A lot of people were against it. And then you go to town meeting for a while, and all of a sudden it's a popular thing. So I've always tried, especially in the FinCom, to follow what the town meeting wants to do and tried to vote that way, or at least try to work that way when I was on the committee, even if I didn't agree with it necessarily. So only so many people are going to come here, and it's going to get so crowded. They don't come, I guess. And maybe that will limit it, along with the technology. I lived in California. It was too crowded. It was too expensive. I left. So I think that's going to be drives whether or not we expand anymore, or how fast we expand. And then again, like I said, we're in conservation, 60% of the land, and land banks buying more properties every day. So that's going to limit the expansion.
I want to talk about the pandemic, but before we get there, just give us what your background is. You gave a little bit of it just now, but for those who don't know you, tell us about yourself.
I was born and raised on Nantucket. I was born in 1963. I graduated from Nantucket High School. I went to East Coast Aerotech. Soon after that, I graduated from East Coast Aerotech with a certification to what's called an airframe and power plant certification to work on aircraft, jets. I worked immediately after that, 84, I went to petroleum helicopters in Louisiana, and I fixed helicopters for 2 years. I hung off oil rigs and fixed helicopters. Oil hit $12 a barrel in 86, February of 86. So I left that job and went back to school at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. I got a degree in aviation electronics. And then I worked at the Space Center for a brief period of time for about 8 months for General Dynamics, launching satellites. I went from there to United Airlines in California, where I worked heavy overhaul on 747s and other aircraft. I went to line maintenance after that in Boston for 8 years. I parted ways with United Airlines, and I've worked for the FAA since 2001 here at the airport. I take care of all the nav aids, the VOR that's out at the Alta Rock, and all the communications. I have a construction business. I build houses in New Hampshire, subdivided land, build roads. I have rental property, and I was on the FinCom for 9 years. So I have a vested interest in Nantucket. I have a son, he's 15 years old. He's in the Nantucket school system. So I plan to stay here for a while, obviously. My family's been here 300 years. So I'm just doing what you're supposed to do in town government. I'm trying to participate, and I'm trying to make things better, hopefully. And that's my plan.
The dominant subject situation on Nantucket at the moment, and other places as well, obviously, is the coronavirus pandemic. As we're taping this, it's June 4th. Summer people are beginning to arrive. You're already seeing license plates from all over the United States. How concerned are you about the fact that so many people from all over the country are now coming to Nantucket and hopefully not bringing the virus with them?
Well, like I said, I work at the airport. During this period of time, we've still had people flying in little 402s, and it's a pretty confined area, 402. The science, I guess a lot of people have become frustrated with it. Maybe a lot of people have too, from the very beginning, on how the science works. Are we supposed to flatten a curve? Are we supposed to kill the curve? Are we supposed to do this herd immunity, like I think it was Sweden? We were told to lock down for 15 days, then it was 30 days, then it's 2 months. What is the best? I don't know what's the summer going to look like. Are people going to come here to go to restaurants? Are they just going to come and stay in their little compounds? Are they going to come for the day? It doesn't seem like there's day trippers. We're already in June, so I don't know if I'm just as concerned as when they first started out. I think we're finding out this thing isn't as maybe deadly as they first said it was, and hopefully that's true. But it's summer. The wind blows on Nantucket, so hopefully social distancing is a lot easier to do than just most places. Yeah, we're gonna see. I mean, we're following the governor's orders. Too bad. I mean, too bad we couldn't have after the first 30 days just kind of not locked everybody else out, or let people quarantine and just opened everything up and saw how things worked out. I mean, I think the hospital, maybe I'm confused when Gary Shaw spoke at the hospital when there was no cases, he kind of said, well, we need to open this up and test it, but we really didn't do that. So we were even more confined than Boston. I mean, like I said, I built houses in New Hampshire, and those crews up there never stopped building. They built right through the pandemic. And the town that I have a house in had no cases, and there was, very few deaths up in New Hampshire compared to, the big places, New York, LA. So I guess it's yet to be seen. Like I said, that's another thing that we're just going to follow the science of the governor, apparently. So that's the path we're on. I guess that's the path we should stay on.
If Nantucket were to decide, when I say Nantucket, I mean the government. If the Nantucket government decided to enact more stringent measures than those of Governor Baker, what would you say to that?
I don't think we should go there. Like I said, I thought we should open things up and then test things. I mean, because I don't know, are we going to live in fear? Is this just going to go on forever? Small businesses are just not going to survive, and it comes down to restaurants or small businesses. I mean, the owners are going to have to decide what they want to do, or what direction they have to take, or what they have to do to protect themselves if they have customers. And the restaurants would have to do the same thing, and then the patrons would have to decide whether they want to go there. But I think we're just holding people back. It's becoming more of a police state at this point, where we're going to tell people to stay home. And stay home till when? Can't stay home forever. The average person's I think I used to know a lot of different statistics about the economy, and I think it's like 30 to 60 days the average person can go without being bankrupt. So we've already done that. So I know a lot of people are financially in trouble, and we need to try something. We need to move forward. I don't think anybody wants to be sick, but I think, like you said, I think the numbers are starting to show that Sweden did that herd immunity, and I don't think their numbers were any different than ours.
Given that Massachusetts, as small a state as it is, still has municipalities with vast differences. I mean, comparing Nantucket to Boston, or comparing it to a tiny town in the Berkshires, much smaller than Nantucket, there's quite a wide range of communities in terms of population, land area, tourism, if it applies. The select board, as you were saying about another subject earlier, doesn't have the expertise to have all the answers to everything. How much should the select board rely on the Board of Health locally as opposed to the governor? If the governor says one thing and the Nantucket Board of Health says something else, how should the select board make up its mind what to do?
Well, that's a good question, because it gets back to trying to follow the governor's webpage. And you go on there when people say things like, okay, we're going to open things up. If things get worse, we might have to close things down again. So you go on the chart or the website to find out what that means. Well, what is, if it gets worse? Does that mean 10 people, 10%, 20%? Where's the chart? What's the science? I don't see it. I didn't see it on the website. So I listened to Channel 5 News one night. They had a woman on there. It was Ellen Boucher or something. Anyway, she was a doctor for Tufts, which was on the team for the governor. And the reporter finally asked her, what does this mean? What does this mean? Like I'm asking you. I mean, it's easy just to talk and talk, but where are the numbers? So she said, you test people for 14 days. If less than 10% test positive, you open up your community. That's a good number. That's a good strategy. I mean, we didn't do that, but then it talks about the curve being flattened. So the curve you wanted to flatten so that everybody didn't go to the hospital at once, but we didn't flatten the curve. We just annihilated the curve. So again, we don't have any immunity under that premise, right? So those are the things that I think frustrated me trying to figure out, because they spend a lot of time speaking, but they don't really, unless I've missed it, get down to what all that really means. I've had to over months try to figure out what they're trying to say or what it's supposed to result in, because otherwise we just have to wait for a vaccine, which we've been getting flu shots forever and everybody still gets the flu. So what does it all mean? What's the science mean? So I think if they made it clearer on just what we're supposed to be doing and what numbers mean what, it would make it a lot clearer. And then I think at this point, I mean, we've done what we can do. I think we need to make choices for ourselves and just be safe. But locking down again, I think, is just a bad idea. Hiding in our houses forever is not going to work.
One of the most important parts of Nantucket's economy is, and has been for some time, the restaurant industry. And there's been a lot of talk right from the start of this, how soon the restaurants could open and under what circumstances. It seems that there is going to be outdoor seating for restaurants, including those that have not had outdoor seating before. And this would mean closing off some sidewalks, some blocks, so the restaurants could do that. What's your feeling there?
I think that I kind of like that idea. I mean, you don't have to close off the whole street, maybe in some cases, but that way you could have so many seats outside. That way, I know they were going to limit 50 to 25% of the seating capacity. So if you had so much seating capacity inside, and then you could have that much more outside. I mean, obviously, it would increase your capacity overall and give the restaurant a chance to live. But I think that's something that should have been maybe resolved. Maybe it has been. I haven't been on these meetings or these committees with the owners. Like I said, with the owners of the restaurants. I know a lot of different restaurants in New York have come up with different philosophies. They have a booth and they have a fiberglass barrier in between the two booths, or they have the separation, maybe every other chair or every other seat, or things like that. So I would hope to think a lot of that stuff's been worked out. And like I said, when you're in business and you own a restaurant and you're not making any money, you can be pretty creative, and I think at the same time safe. And then it's up to the customer is going to eventually decide whether they're coming back to the restaurants.
If you block off certain sidewalks, that's going to force some pedestrians onto the streets.
Mhm.
Would it follow that you would want to see some street blocks closed off temporarily?
Like I said, that's something that it's inherent to each restaurant, right? Main Street. I mean, I don't know how many restaurants are still on Main Street. So I think it would make it kind of nice to close off some streets completely. But like I said, that's a decision that, I mean, obviously, in front of the Rosencrown, you've got traffic from the steamship, so you can't close off that street. So it would be site specific to each restaurant. And like I said, I'd work that out with the owners and the town and officials, and we'd have to go, I think, site by site. But it wouldn't bother me to close off certain streets as long as it was conducive, like I said, to the traffic that from the steamship and other areas.
Another big problem the restaurants have to face is help, because a lot of their summer employees come into the country on visas, and visas at this point are not being handed out.
Right.
Now, that's not a Nantucket decision, obviously. It comes out of Washington. But I'm wondering, in your view, how much influence can the Select Board of Nantucket or the Select Board over on the Cape community, how much influence can they have on Washington? What are you prepared to do to try to influence Washington if it was a question of more visas meaning more jobs on Nantucket?
Well, you better have a hotline because we're running out of time. But I've dealt with Washington with aviation safety issues. So it'd have to be something that they'd be encouraged to do, because, Washington's a hard nut to crack. Anyway, we can get into what I think about all that. But this is the point. You've got employees, so just an average restaurant anywhere in the country, You've got a bunch of employees, they work at your restaurant, you close the restaurant down. Those people have to try to make a living somewhere. Maybe they're not even coming back. I mean, this is a tragedy. I mean, so when they talked about that to begin with, oh, we're going to close for 2 months, we're going to close for 1 month. It's not like throwing a switch. So you're right. These restaurants, not just the seating challenge do we have a challenge. Are we even going to be able to get any employees to come in and work at these restaurants? It's ugly. It's bad. So, and then say they opened up the visa program. I don't know, are those kids going to come? Maybe they're busy already doing something else. So it's just, it's a new world, and it's not just as easy as throwing a switch where, okay, now people come back, and I don't know. I'm glad I don't own a restaurant.
We've got time for one more question. That's about the town's budget. The proposed budget is around $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have the exact number, but the finance director is forecasting a budget shortfall of just over $6 million. How do you tackle that one?
Well, Corey Meyer said that to me yesterday about the $6 million. I didn't see that because I've been watching the meetings. I know we had $1.9 million, I believe, extra, which we turned into free cash from receipts from last year, I guess. The airport, I believe, received $6 million, so we don't have to worry about that enterprise fund, which we are obligated to pay if they fall short. I believe the steamship got their money, or getting money, so we don't have to worry about that 35% that we owe of their debt. I believe that's the number. I believe we can tighten our belt enough for 1 year and just stop projects, maybe capital spending, just things that you do in your own household budget where you were going to do this or you're going to do that, and now you just kind of don't do anything. You just go on autopilot for a little while and don't do unnecessary spending. Don't call up the lawyer and ask him any advice so we don't have professional service expenses. Just yeah, you'd have to go line by line through each budget and figure out where you could just not spend and cut some fat out.
What about ways to increase revenues? No one wants his or her taxes raised, but should that be on the table?
Well, taxes go up 2.5% a year anyhow. We have a lot of growth, obviously. The levy limit's at, I think, $80 million now. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to pay their taxes. I just saw a thing on unemployment. Different states in New England. It's hard to call it unemployment because it was more like a temporary unemployment. I saw a figure in New Hampshire of 66% of the people that filed for unemployment during the pandemic have already come back to work. So it's not like a real number, the unemployment number, because they were forced to stay home. So I guess we're going to get to see just how quick the economy is going to return. The restaurant industry is a bad example because that's just being devastated. But construction, houses, I sell houses. There's still not enough houses in the inventory, so we just sold 3 more houses in New Hampshire during the pandemic, and that doesn't seem to stop at all. So there's one side of it that's looking ugly, one side is still looking good. So if I answered your question, but I think we're in another strange economy. I think one part of the economy is still pent up with work and a backlog, and then of course entertainment and restaurants, things like that are probably going to be hurt for a while.
Clifford Williams, thank you for being part of Nantucket Community Television's coverage of the 2020 annual town election. And to all of our viewers, please be sure to vote on or before June 16th. I'm Charlie Walters. Thank you for tuning in.